Alien controllers detected the approaching human warship and emergency klaxons blared. Consoles flashed red. The officers felt their faces twist in dread. Through spinning screens, the silhouette of the vessel grew. The whole fleet was gripped with terror. The last threat was here, inextirpable. All eyes locked now from one edge of the galaxy to another. Panicked messages crackled through every alien command post. No sensor logs errand better than the impossible reading. A lone human-class warship had entered restricted space without warning. This ship's, rumored to have weapons the Alliance had never seen, now flew toward a heavily secured area. Alarms blared across strategic hubs and analysts raced to determine a response, combing through incomplete information about human capabilities. They had dismissed humanity as a minor species without advanced technology decades earlier. To alien watchers on the outside, the Earth's slow march over billions of years revealed only a modest understanding of interstellar travel. No one expected that humans so prone to being underestimated would someday field a surface vessel that could penetrate advanced defensive nets. Communications dribbled in about fresh fusion of tactics and hardware. Rumors bubbled that the Organics had rail cannons energized by exotic matter or shields capable of warping gravity wells. All of a sudden, these rumors became very real. The first jolt coursed through the border outposts. Patrol frigates disappeared without issuing SOS signals. Automated turrets could not get a lock on any target, recording only ephemeral shadows on their sensors. Within hours, senior admirals gathered in an emergency council. They played back footage of shuddering wreckage ripped open by unknown attacks. Each display showed a vexing truth. The humans had found ways to defeat the Empire's long reliable defenses. A panic gripped the top ranks. This swept the channels with orders to all warships alone to intercept the human invader. The alien commanders used to methodical campaigns were reacting to a threat they hardly understood. Many had become haughty, certain that their fleets would always rule. Now they knew those assumptions were dangerously naive. In war rooms deep below crusts of worlds, tactical aides whispered game plans. Some proposed a quick preemptive strike, but data suggested that confronting the human vessel too quickly could be deadly. Other proposed options included baiting the warship into a heavily fortified system and attempting to swarm it with larger numbers. Conflicting theories produced confusion. All the while, the threat was marching on. Then came updates, hour after hour. Scanning arrays were detecting bursts of energy consistent with advanced propulsion. Recon probes disappeared around the vessel's last known position. There was speculation that humans had somehow created stealth fields that defied normal scanning methods. A feeling of dread swept through officials who had once thought human technology was centuries behind their own. Among the alien hierarchy, blame spread quickly. Some were adamant that intelligence networks had failed to track Earth's scientific advancement. Others took the military to task, saying it underestimated human resilience. What got lost in all the bickering was one simple fact. The warship was now operating inside heavily patrolled territory, heading toward key command stations. Junior officers, previously eager to show what they could do, now held back. They called for reinforcements before daring to fight. There were reports of entire squadrons that had gone missing after engaging the human vessel. Scattered transmissions depicted unstoppable projectiles tearing through hulls at impossible velocities. Terrifying had made its way into official briefings, an acknowledgement that the aliens were confronting something well beyond what their existing doctrines could handle. Citizens of friendly worlds could feel the tension. News outlets relay grim updates about a rogue ship flying in the face of the Empire's gorgeous fleets. Panic played out in public rallies. Some called for immediate retaliation, while others silently wondered if they should be afraid of humanity's apparent advance in technology. The inner halls of power were rife with uncertainty, and the common denominator was the same sobering truth. The human warship's arrival was no fluke. Its trajectory appeared purposeful, targeting critical infrastructure. If allowed to proceed, it may dismantle vital supply routes and assault defenses across the planet. The consequences would upend the balance of alien power. So a rallying cry went up among the Allied fleets. Converge, intercept, destroy the intruder. Admirals risked their reputations neutralizing this one vessel. Reinforcements poured in from systems distance away. No great titan, no mighty dreadnought, famed for pounding rebellious worlds into submission, with their colossal weapons now focused on one small target. Crews braces for a battle with everything they had, but behind every bravado was fear. If the stories turned out to be true, no amount of bravado would save them. Strategists built plan after plan, more elaborate than the last. They wanted to trap the warship, take away its stealth, and then rain unbearable fire upon it. But as they quickly discovered, the humans had no plans to stick to any script. Unexpected moves broke the bounds of traditional logic. Everything was in place for a confrontation that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. With each passing second, the fear grew that this warship was much more dangerous than early reports had the courage to imply. The alien commanders girded themselves, feeling unsure whether their great mobilization would succeed or disintegrate. In the warship's narrow, tightly packed corridors, the human crew prepared for the fight of their lives. They had redirected their final resources into this one craft, betting everything on a single blow. Every console buzzed with purpose, from the experimental rail cannons built into reinforced plating to the next-generation targeting suites that were a product of decades' worth of laborious research. This was no ordinary vessel. It was the ultimate result of Earth's desperate struggle for survival. Their homeworld, ravaged by alien attacks, was at a breaking point. Warriors had pushed their bodies, cars would blaze through the races, and when diplomacy broke down and friendships fell apart, humanity had chosen one last resort: to create a warship so mighty that it could pierce through the strongest shields. Engineers pored over black market tech, rehomed experimental drives, and tortured shield arrays under horrific conditions. They created a vessel that could outrun, outmaneuver, and outgun its bigger competitors. The arsenal was formidable. High-velocity projectiles, strong enough to take capital ships apart, sat loaded. Carefully modulated to slip past conventional shielding, energy lances waited to be unleashed. Drones in swarms, each programmed to learn the outcome in real time, lay in wait in hidden bays. In the center of this floating fortress loomed a new breed of fusion reactor, funneling tremendous power to every system. If it shorted out, it would explode with cataclysmic force. But if it held its ground, the ship could battle far above its weight class. But machinery alone was not a measure of the warship's true power. The crew's determination made it more than a typical ship. Every member had known loss, friends taken, colonies seized. They battled not for glory, but to save an entire species. That solidarity gave them their moxie, and their inclination to try moves that other people said could not be done. They were under no illusions as to the odds. If they failed, it would be only a matter of time before Earth followed. On the bridge, a taut calm held. The pilot mapped a route through dense enemy networks, and tactical officers calculated firing solutions on the fly. It would take surgical precision to execute the plan. One wrong move, and they would be consumed by the unending tide of alien vessels. The warship sensors charted the enemy's rough locations, signaling choke points. The goal was obvious: shatter the aliens' command structure before they could organize a coordinated defense. Outside the hull, stars shimmered in quiet witness. The warship was adrift, a specter in the darkness, moving under reduced power. After they had committed to open engagement, stealth would be the bitch. Countdown timers ticked down to that fateful moment. Supplies were limited. No reinforcements waited. This one craft either won or died. Yet amid the tension, hope flickered. The biggest strength of humanity was adaptability. Earth's forces learned alien tactics, gleaning patterns and weaknesses over the years. Now, they would take advantage of every crack, from predictable formation hierarchies to slow sensor recalibration times. If fortune and skill held, the warship would slash open a path to the enemy's heart. Below decks, engineers conducted last diagnostics on the railguns. Pilots wore exosuits as preparations were made to deploy fighter drones if necessary. Medical teams prepared emergency kits for the expected casualties. A silence fell over the hallways, a tacit pledge that nobody would break ranks, no matter how dire the situation. Failure was not an option. The crew members tensed when the first proximity alerts started sounding. Vessels were coming in from all sides, snaring them in a web. It was time. With a single command, the warship's engines blared into action. Shield generators flared, glittering along the hull. Weapons armed, thrumming an electric sound through the decks. Fear mixed with sheer willpower. Hands moved with steady confidence, station by station, fueled by the awareness that the fate of an entire species depended on them. The pilot exhaled in the last moments leading up to contact, eyes fixed on the spinning visual of inbound targets. This was it, humanity's stand against those who thought they could crush Earth whenever they wanted. There was no turning back. The warship forged ahead, cutting through the emptiness with deadly elegance. Overmatched by the enemy's combined strength, it nevertheless held a glimmer of rebellion that no alien technology could snuff out. The very next instant, lasers flared on the horizon. The war for humanity's survival had started. The instant the warship entered range, energy bolts slashed through the dark. Streaks of jagged beams streaked past, brushing space with bloody brilliance. As this barrage played out, the human vessel sprang into action. The engines flared, and it launched into evasive arcs that no enemy predictive reported had ever dared to claim. Turrets locked on, firing salvos of kinetic slugs in return. Alien shields, seemingly unbreakable, shattered beneath the persistent strikes. In minutes, the emptiness turned into a battleground of crashing cannons and swirling wreckage. Squadrons of alien fighters shrieked in and unleashed guided missiles. The warship's point defense lasers flared, severing warheads before they could detonate. There were explosions all over the battlefield, each flare catching the reflected light from the hulls of fighting craft. Even with superior numbers, the aliens found themselves responding to the human ship instead of controlling the pace. Farther into the chaotic fray, capital ships rolled onward. These leviathans dwarfed the human warship, each studded with fortress-class turrets. Coordinated beams met in a single, searing line, attempts to melt their way through the warship's shielding. The brightness rivaled that of a small sun. On the bridge, warning klaxons blared, entire sections flashing red on the tactical display. Everything was left toward the barrier as the pilot took a hard right. For a torturous heartbeat, failure of the shield in question loomed. Then, in a set of maneuvers rarely seen away from simulators, the warship twisted underneath the barrage, returning fire with a volley that struck its nearest battleship's flank. Metal warped, internal decks ignited, and the battleship reeled, venting atmosphere. A chain reaction triggered secondary blasts that sent nearby cruisers scattering. In the midst of the chaos, the human ship unleashed a swarm of autonomous drones. These nimble little machines zipped in and out of lines of fire, seeking the weak joints of weapon arrays. Allied signals flashed on the warship screens as the drones transmitted real-time sensor feeds that helped guide lethal strikes on weak spots. In a bid to recover control, alien admirals ordered a broad encirclement. The idea was to trap the warship and pound it from all sides. But each time, the human craft punched through holes, reversing the narrative. Precision strikes had crippled entire squadrons. Where the vessels of the alien fleet were counter-missile protected in particular from slow reloading times, the warship's railguns cycled faster than any known standard. Hulls broke apart in relentless bombardments, leaving behind drifting wreckage. At every corner, the alien formation collapsed. Their advanced technology, believed to be light years ahead of that on Earth, fell under the weight of human tactics. The warship's caprice spread panic. It appeared to disappear amid debris, emerging behind carriers to land a devastating strike. Alien officers screamed conflicting orders over several channels. Some called for an immediate withdrawal, others for press the attack, certain that brute strength had to counter that human force of will. Aboard the warship, the tension was thick as the swirling smoke in damaged compartments. Engineers redirected power to stabilize the shields. Overloaded panels sparked and sputtered. Medics ferried injured crew members to the triage. And still the rail cannons boomed, the pilot's hands steady on the controls. They had come too far to give up an inch. An alien dreadnought, famous for conquering entire worlds, tried a direct impact vector. Its monstrous silhouette loomed large, casting a shadow over all. In retaliation, the warship sped directly at it, tangling through different beams in a maze. Just before impact, the pilot triggered a massive repulsor burst. The dreadnought staggered, knocked off its line, presenting its internal engines. That moment of vulnerability was all it took. Rail slugs slammed into the reactor core, exploding in a blinding, cascading detonation that cleaved the dreadnought into molten shards. Alien lines faltered, shocked by the sudden loss of their most powerful unit. The carnage strewn on the battlefield was twisted metal and shimmering plasma clouds. Even experienced commanders had trouble adjusting. This was not how fighting typically unfolded. By standard doctrines, the smaller force ought to have been overwhelmed. But here the unending tide was human. Every wave of alien reinforcements ended up outwitted. Inch by inch, the incursion burrowed deeper into the Empire's carefully fortified area. As the battle dragged on, one crucial realization spread through the alien ranks. They were losing. Their basic assumptions about the threat from humans had been tragically misguided. The intelligence, initially dismissed as alarmist, had turned out correct. And worse, the humans appeared to be getting more efficient with every passing second, analyzing patterns, uncovering weaknesses in the alien tactics. There was a rumor going around that human craft may be recording telemetric data on all of their frequencies. Terror swept through entire crews, trumping even the discipline drilled into them after years of service. By the midpoint of the battle, some half-dozen alien capital ships had been reduced to floating husks. The smaller frigates ran scattered like frightened game. Only scattered pockets of resistance remained, pinned in place by the warship's relentless aggression. In command centers across the fleet, dread mounted. If one human vessel could cause that much damage, how many more might be out there? Was this the beginning of a much bigger invasion? No one had answers, but the immediate stakes were grim. The alien line of defense was crumbling and the humans showed no signs of mercy. The next wave of violence, it appeared, would reach desperate new highs. The stage was prepared for the Empire's last gambit, a do-or-die maneuver that could save their pride or confirm their doom. Staggering under losses, the alien command had gathered its last remaining assets for one final counterstroke. Across the ravaged battlefield, transmissions flew between surviving warships, plans made under intolerable pressure of time. The alien admirals knew that if the human craft breached much deeper, that key command elements would hang with no protection. They had little choice but to make one last stand. The plan relied on drawing the warship into a complex trap. Some of the fleet would pretend to have gone to pieces, falling back toward a sector plagued with turbulent spatial rifts. Such anomalies had disrupted navigation and shield harmonics. We hoped that the humans, rejuvenated by triumph, would pursue. In that deadly region, the aliens had established some secret experimental weapon platforms equipped with antimatter warheads. If the warship went too far, those platforms would blow up, entangling it in overlapping shockwaves. Time was short. Teams toiled madly to make crippled cruisers just enough seaworthy to provide them limited maneuverability. Fighter planes were refueling, ready to be sacrificed if need be. Boards of heavily damaged ships cannibalized themselves to volunteer for the suicidal missions. In the hushed alleys of alien decks, tense prayers were whispered to whichever god would grant such a thing. Underneath the grim determination was raw terror. They were up against an enemy who appeared to be unstoppable. From the alien point of view, there were signals of a widespread human pullback. My father saw that the various pockets of resistance were retreating toward the twisting distortions around the sector boundary. The strategic officer aboard the warship examined the unusual motion. It could be a panic-filled retreat or a shrewd ruse. The pilot examined the gravitational reads. Rifts were known to fry advanced electronics. It would be dangerous to go in, but to hesitate was to tempt the loss of momentum. The humans had done significant damage, but the Empire still had enough to regroup if they could get time. The leadership of the warship decided to chase, knowing that caution in itself can squander a historic advantage. They shifted shield frequencies in an attempt to counter the localized distortions, a hope that would have to be enough. Thus began a tense pursuit. The warship entered the swirling region pursued by the aliens, where cosmic anomalies lashed like phantom snakes. Navigation scanners flickered, badly fractals of chaotic geometry. The provisions of enemy vessels failed apart into clumps, requiring most human beings to share targets. Ambushes lurched from behind drifting wreckage. Ion storms flared, shorting out some of the warship's instruments. Amidst all of this chaos, the alien admirals put their gambit into its final play. The assault frigate scrambled ahead, deploying pods along their vectors that would tether antimatter charges throughout the sector. The plan called for timing it just right. Once the warship was tricked into the right position, one command would set off every warhead. Even if they couldn't totally demolish the human craft, the overlapping salvos might damage it enough for killing blows. But the humans weren't oblivious to danger. Scans suggested there were large energy spikes at improbable coordinates. Fragmentary comm signals indicated a larger plan. The warship's officers conferred and deduced that something catastrophic was afoot. Even with the uncertainty, they kept moving forward, deploying drones to scout suspicious areas. Whenever an alien ship attempted to palm them up, the warship flowed like a dancer around, and between shipworks wreckage and wicked swirl energy burns. The warship attacked the newly anchored platforms, resulting in a furious battle. The aliens fought with the fury of cornered beasts, dropping salvo after salvo. One platform was consumed in an inferno of fire. A second unleashed a torrent of unstable plasma, steeping the warship deeper into the maze of distortions. Even the environment itself became hostile. The hull was buffeted by gravity eddies. Lightning-like arcs lit the gloom, momentarily showing looming shapes of dented cruisers and carriers. Desperate alien defenders made kamikaze runs. Some slammed the warship's shield directly, forcing it to reroute power from weapons to structural integrity. Others wanted to disable the ship's thrusters, hoping to leave it stranded in the deadly rifts. Panic and courage mixed in the alien ranks. Every one of those pilots knowing this was their only shot at redemption. Tension boiled inside the warship. Consoles flashed with damage warnings. The pilot fought erratic flight trajectories. Engineers scrambled to stabilize the reactor and to vent excess heat to forestall meltdown. The distortions of the environment threatened the collapse of the shield at any moment, but the humans pushed on. They figured out from their scanners that the bombs were antimatter platforms and became convinced, based on what they found in the archives, that if they left them behind, the rest of the planet was doomed. Then, the shocking twist. The aliens initiated an early partial detonation. A number of the warheads set off, creating a wave of energy waves. All around, the area exploded in light, casting monstrous shadows. A violent shockwave struck the warship, pitching it sideways. Alarms howled. Hull plating crumpled in spots, sending sparks and shrapnel twirling through compartments. For one heartbeat, the vessel languid, levels of shield dangerously low. Alien cruisers closed in to deliver a killing blow and launched everything they had. Dozens of missiles raced toward the battered warship. On the bridge, the crew rallied their every reserve. They redirected auxiliary power, stabilizing the shields for another push. Point defense turrets opened up, slicing through wave after wave of incoming ordnance. Drones supporting pounded the chasers. The final antimatter platforms hovered in the distance, waiting to be triggered. In a brave lunge, the warship leapt forward, picking off the last bombs like flies, preventing them from igniting a second pyre. Each platform exploded in a glancing flash as the humans detonated them from a safe distance, defusing the aliens' last ambush. It came at a high cost, but the path was now clear. The aliens' admirals, their ultimate gambit gone wrong, were reeling in disbelief. Their formerly well-meshed net splintered into gasping pieces. The time had come for the decisive battle that would decide the course of this whole confrontation. Flames erupted from the human warship as it plowed into the roiling rifts. Parts of its hull glowed molten red and sparks danced from blackened plating, but it was operational. The alien admirals, stunned at their failed trap, attempted to administer the few vessels that remained. Antimatter explosions rocked the entire sector, sending aftershocks rippling outward, glowing clouds of residue coalescing across battered fleets. Seeing an opportunity, the human crew did not let the enemy recover. They pointed a straight line toward the largest concentration of alien warships, where the high command must still be hanging out. This last assault would either solidify human superiority or ensure mutual annihilation. No one doubted the stakes. Desperate alien captains seeking to safeguard their superiors created an ad hoc barricade of carriers and cruisers. Engines screamed at full thrust, cannons primed. The blockade simultaneously released a torrent of lasers and missiles so dense that it seemed impossible to avoid. The warship's shield alarms howled. The operators redirected as much as they could, preparing for the storm. Beams crashed into the barrier in a shower of sparks. Battle armor flaked away to expose skeletal frames. The craft rocked violently from the impact. He clenched, every muscle inside him, unwilling to surrender to the onslaught. The warship wove through the inferno with eerie precision. Counterfire shredded the enemy formation. Kinetic shots hammered carriers, splitting them from bow to stern. Drones swarmed in, disabling frigates' critical systems. Disorganized calls for retreat crackled over alien channels. The blockade faltered under pressure from fear. With one great burst, the human ship set its sights on the center battleship, which anchored the bright blue line. Its heavy hull bristled with high-tech turrets, thought to be indestructible. But the humans had arrived ready. A targeted salve from each rail cannon flooded the bow shields of the battleship. Energy flickered in protest. Before they could power back up, the warship's last volley of projectiles slammed into the battleship's reactor. A second later, a massive flash marked the death of the sector's greatest protector. Disabled ships struggling around it buckled away from the blast. Some spin out of control into collisions. Eves of those aliens sank at that sight. The crew was abandoning formations, thrusters firing haphazardly. They raced past each other in that confusion, desperate to flee, bringing with them ever more extreme command signals. The admiral's flags were even. In silence, adrift in the turmoil of panic. The human warship had burned through their finest defenses. What was confusion erupted into mass hysteria. The human team took over the advantage. Hurt but unbowed, the warship made its way onward, methodically destroying every ship that attempted a rally. Flames lit up the darkness and were mirrored on crumpled carcasses of wrecks. The alien warships powered down their weapons, one by one, and tried to run, banking hard to reach the jump coordinates. Some drifted empty, with gaping holes. The navy of the once proud empire was a scattering of blocked craft. In a last-ditch effort at containment, the highest-ranked officer recorded by the alien stayed behind to broadcast an appeal to any living unit. They pleaded for a unified front, for all the captains to converge at predetermined coordinates. The call went unanswered. Fear triumphed over loyalty. Those who had witnessed the warship's savage potential were wary of gathering, fearing that they would simply present themselves as easy targets. Thus ended the final coordinated resistance. The human vessel moved freely, a blockade having not been effective. Frantic pleas for mercy came on alien transmissions, too, but the warship did not reply. Its mission required the neutralization of any threat to Earth, and the road to strategic victory was clear. On the horizon were the drifting remains of star cruisers and shattered dreadnoughts. A shocked silence prevailed across the alien command channels. The admirals knew they were defeated by one organic craft. The unstoppable armadas that had once terrorized whole quadrants lay in shambles. No one there was under any illusions about how significant this loss was. The human warship had been untouchable, its cunning defeating overwhelming numbers. Fear infected every survivor. Rumors hinted at a whole human armada standing by. It was not known whether this was the sole warship or just the vanguard of a larger force. For the humans, it was a magnificent victory. They had destroyed the greatest threat to their homeworld in living memory. But the cost was high. The warship was pockmarked with gaping wounds, and casualties were heavy among the battered crew. Even so, standing among the toppling alien fleet, relief and fatigue mixed. Planet Earth, finally, would have space to recover and prepare. It brought about the alien exodus. The few ships capable of jumping fled the area at top speed, bypassing the chain of command. Captains send out screeching messages about their human tech, that humanity can never be engaged with anything other than overwhelming force. The proud formation, with plenty of confidence, disbanded into panicked flight. In that fractured silence, the warship hesitated, looking for any last threats. Its weapons were still on standby, but the balance had shifted beyond all doubt. What had once been an unstoppable fear knelling in the hearts of the aliens was now a cosmic certainty. Humans, paradoxically cornered, had mutated themselves into a force as dominant as they had become across entire fleets. Thus began a new age of caution and reverence, written in the memory of the galaxy by the devastation streaming in the wake of this one ship. When the last beams dimmed, the battlefield was littered with burned metal and quiet wreckage. Scavenged dreadnoughts coasted without power, belching gas into the void. Fires glimmered through torn hull breaches, then died away. The Cemetery of Ambition was the final resting point for a decisive chapter of galactic warfare. No alarms left, no last stand, only the ghost of a struggle that once ripped through whole systems. The human warship hung in the devastation. Within its damaged hallways, repair crews scrambled to plug breaches and restore vital systems. Flashing emergency lights reflected on tired features. The crew was battered, but its spirit was unbroken. They had battled against impossible odds and preserved their homeworld from an empire that had once seemed insuperable. Word of the victory traveled faster than light. It was these that fleets in adjacent sectors received last, alien screams, cut short by overwhelming barrages. News spread through far-flung worlds that the much-derided humans had triumphed. Earth's allies celebrated in clandestine enclaves, emboldened by evidence that the Empire's grip could indeed be challenged. For many worlds across alien star charts, the memory of this war cast a chilly shadow. Commanders who once scoffed at Earth's primitive warcraft now pored over sensor logs with shaking hands. They watched as one ship, guided by rocket-fueled determination and cutting-edge design, had collapsed what had once been known to be an impenetrable blockade. Ambitious governors held back, uncertain about the wisdom of arousing humanity. Even would-be adversaries knew they had to exercise caution with Earth. For the warship's crew, jubilation mixed with grief. The decks were lacerated by deadly explosions, and many compartments had sustained significant damage. And injuries took their toll. Supplies ran low. But through every hallway echoed a sense of renewal purpose. The wind demonstrated that human beings were no longer soft targets, that they were no longer a bit of an afterthought when it came to matters in the galaxy. Among alien leadership, at the highest ranks, chaos reigned. Some factions pushed for immediate negotiations, hoping to avoid a wider conflict that would end in more vessels from humanity rampaging across their dominion. Others called for revenge, convinced that they needed to hit back fast. Still, none could argue. Their strategic doctrines had failed. The question now was whether their empire could adapt quickly enough to keep pace with the evolution of humanity that no one had expected at the time. Meanwhile, humanity's far-flung settlements on Earth began to breathe again, so long quaking in fear of alien invasion. If one warship could wreak such a trail of destruction, maybe a reborn fleet would be waiting to protect every outpost. Scientists analyzed data harvested from the engagement, hungry to improve the technology. Politicians read speeches about entering a new era of unity and defense. Soldiers, fresh out of training, imagined training on next-generation vessels. Even more devastating than the battered hero continuing to drift among the wreckage. But the burden of victory weighed down. The galaxy had glimpsed the sheer, unrestrained fury that humans could unleash when backed into a corner. As rumors circulated that this ship was just a prototype, fear grew. Diplomatic channels burned with anxious inquiries. The races that had not sworn allegiance to the Empire wondered if they would, too, suffer from Earth's newfound strength. The warship, however, was not only indefensible, it had also set off a wider arms race. Now, everyone wanted the ability to stand against such a threat. Treading its way through a graveyard of cruelly twisted armor and drifting debris, the human warship finally found a reasonable course for safer territory. Boosting thrusters to partial power, it salvaged what it could. In the distance, bruised alien hulls drifted cut up and bleeding in testament to the day's slaughter. We mercifully read no more of the beams raging, the detonations. For a split second, the crew stared at the wreckage, remembering each sacrifice that brought them here. Thankfulness and mourning surged inside them. Then, engines sputtering, they left. The journey home was long and the repairs to the damage extensive, but their mission was accomplished. Behind them, the starlit dark closed in, swallowing up a battlefield that never failed to be a clear warning. Before long, tales of this battle spread to every corner of the cosmos. Historians marked it as a turning point, the moment that one human warship established a new reality in which Earth could no longer be ignored. The Empire's dreams of hegemony lay in ruins, but the win also planted the seeds for an inevitable conflict in the future. Forces on both sides would regroup and rearm, resolved not to be caught by surprise again. And so this saga was not over. As the warship faded from the edges of sensor range, all who heard of its deeds knew a new truth. Humanity had risen to the top of the galactic pecking order. In careful whispers, alien commanders communicated news of a coming storm, a confrontation that would make even this day's destruction pale by comparison. There was silence, for the moment, but next wars stirred on the horizon, fanned by the memory of a single human warship that terrorized an empire.